In a small, forgotten village nestled deep in the Carpathian Mountains, there was a house that no one dared to approach. It stood at the edge of a dark forest, its windows broken and its walls covered in creeping ivy. The villagers whispered of terrible things that had happened there, of rituals and sacrifices performed by a cult that worshipped ancient, malevolent gods. One night, a young scholar named Elias arrived in the village, seeking knowledge of the occult. He had heard the stories and, driven by curiosity, decided to investigate the abandoned house. The villagers warned him, but he was determined. Armed with a lantern and his research notes, Elias set off toward the house as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air grew colder as he approached the house, and an unnatural silence fell over the forest. Pushing open the creaking door, Elias stepped inside. The interior was as decayed as the exterior, filled with the smell of rot and decay. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, and the remains of a stone altar stood in the center of the main room. Elias lit his lantern and began to examine the symbols, recognizing some from his studies. They were sigils of summoning and binding, used to call forth entities from beyond. As he traced his fingers over the carvings, a chill ran down his spine. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and the flame of his lantern flickered violently before extinguishing, plunging him into darkness. He fumbled to relight the lantern, but before he could, a low, guttural whisper filled the air. Elias froze, heart pounding, as the whisper grew louder, forming words in an ancient tongue he didn't understand. The shadows in the room seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting into grotesque shapes. A pair of glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness, and Elias felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He tried to move, but his body refused to obey. The entity stepped forward, its form indistinct but terrifying, and Elias could feel its malevolent presence pressing down on him. "Who dares to disturb our sanctuary?" the voice hissed, echoing in his mind. Elias couldn't speak, his throat constricted by fear. The entity moved closer, and he could see the outlines of skeletal hands reaching for him. In a final act of desperation, he pulled a small, silver amulet from his pocket, a relic he had taken from a forgotten crypt. He held it up, hoping it would offer some protection. The entity recoiled, hissing in fury. The amulet began to glow with a bright, white light, and the shadows around Elias dissipated. The entity's eyes burned with rage, and with a deafening roar, it vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Elias collapsed to the floor, trembling and gasping for breath. He knew he had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. Clutching the amulet, he stumbled out of the house, vowing never to return. As he reached the village, he looked back one last time. The house stood in the distance, its dark windows staring back at him like empty, soulless eyes. Elias left the village the next morning, the weight of what he had encountered heavy on his mind. He abandoned his studies of the occult, knowing that some knowledge was too dangerous to pursue. But in the back of his mind, he knew that the entity was still out there, waiting for another curious soul to fall into its trap.